Okay, so 4.5. We're still solving, but still using the factoring, but this time we're going to solve by factoring. So all those rules that we had before, all the stuff we were doing on that last test, that's why I kind of let you use your notes on that part, because we've been working on the factoring and, we didn't have a good review day, so I thought, well, let's just let you go back and do that. So everything, all those different things that we had with the solve by factoring, when we're doing the factoring, all those same things we were doing, it was there. We'll review those kind of real quick and just bring it all back together here. Okay, if we're solving by factoring, the biggest thing is your equation has to equal 0. Once it's set equal to 0, then you factor that part and we'll add in the one little part of them on the end of it there. If it doesn't equal 0, then just rewrite the equation so it does equal 0. Okay, so we've got it rewritten so that you've got everything equal to 0. Go ahead and factor the parts of it out. And then after you've got it factored, then you set each parenthesis equal to 0 to solve. Okay, and that basically means that now, everything in the past we've done, we usually were looking for one answer. Because when we do the factoring, most every time we did this, we had 2 parentheses, so now you're looking at 2 answers. So, every time we're going up on this. And basically is this part. The power that you have, and they'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and mention it now. Your highest power that you have, if you're doing x to the second or x to the third or something like that, whatever your highest power is, that's going to equal the number of solutions that you have. So if we start off with a problem that's x to the third, that means we're going to have 3 solutions. If we start off, most of the ones we're going to start with x to the second. So if we start off with something x to the second, that means you're going to have 2 solutions. Okay, so we're going to start with x squared minus 5x minus 14. And again, normally on the last test, we would have factored this part. The only thing we're going to do different is we're going to set it equal to 0, and instead of just factoring, we're still going to solve it. Just go with one extra step. Okay, now the initial part of it's going to start off the same way. We're going to find the factors of negative 14. And we're looking for the pair that the sum is going to be negative 5. All right, and you only have 2 options with 14. It's either 1 and 14 or it's 2 and 7. And then again, all the rules that we did before, everything's exactly the same. If this sum that we're looking for over here is negative, that means the bigger number has to be negative. If you do a negative by negative, that means the other number is going to have to be a positive. Okay, so the pair that's going to get us negative 5, that's going to be the 2 and 7. Okay, and here's the only difference on what we're doing. On the last test where we're just factoring, this is where you would stop. For this part, well, now it's equal to 0, so then we're going to take each parentheses we have and set both of those parentheses equal to 0. Okay, so for x plus 2, just subtract 2 from both sides. And for x minus 7, you'll add 7 to both sides. Okay, and there you go. You've got your 2 answers. And again, we start off with x squared, so there's your 1, 2 answers you're looking for. Now, the only time that may not be exactly true is that sometimes when we do this, you might get the same 2 answers, so you really only have 1 answer that's repeated. But anytime you're doing this, though, you're still looking for x squared, so you're always looking for two answers. It may be that one of the answers might repeat. That would be about the only thing that wouldn't really be true for that part. Okay, let's give you another one here. So let's go with x squared minus 7x equals negative 12. Okay, so here's the very first thing. That again, if it's to do factoring and solving, you've got to have it equal to 0. Well, this one's got this negative 12 on the end, so we've got to get rid of that negative 12. So for that part, we'll just add 12 so we can move it over to the left-hand side. Okay, so once we moved it to the left-hand side that's equal to 0, well, now we're back to the same basic setup. We've got x squared minus 7x plus 12. Well, that means we're looking for the factors of positive 12, where the sum is going to equal negative 7. Okay, and again, you don't have that many factors for 12. It's either 1 and 12, it's 2 and 6, or it's 3 and 4. Okay, and again, every single time, whatever this sign is that's on the B term, that sign has to be on the bigger number. So every single one of these, we know that those numbers are going to be negative. The other number depends on the signs that you have. So now if you take a positive divided by a negative, well, that's a negative, so that means that the other number is also negative. Okay, so the pair that adds up to negative 7, that's 3 and 4. So if we were just factoring it, it'd be x minus 3 and x minus 4. But again, because in this section we're solving it, we've got to go that one more step and take the x minus 3 and let it equal 0, and the x minus 4 and let it equal 0. Okay, and most of the time the solving is usually pretty short because usually you're just going to either add or subtract. This one you'll add 3 to both sides. So we've got x equals 3. This one will add 4 to both sides. So we've got x equals 4. Okay, so, and again, really for the most part, the solving should be pretty easy. The hardest thing you're going to have to do is do the factoring. So it's just rolling right into what we were doing in the first few sections there. So the solving should be really easy. It's the factoring that's really going to be the part you're going to have to just keep practicing. And this will be good because it just keeps us practice, keeps us going for everything else we've got to do. All right, so example 3. So you've got x squared minus 25 equals 0. Okay, and again, this kind of goes into that special cases part we had. If you've got x squared minus 25, you've only got the two terms. And again, x squared would be x times x. 25, you can write that as 5 times 5. And we said as long as that's a subtraction sign and that's a perfect square number and that's a perfect square number, you can put x and x, 5 and 5. And since it's a negative 25, we're going to make one positive and one negative. You know, and if this had been 9x squared in the beginning, we'd have made it 3x and 3x on the inside. If it had been 16x squared, we'd have just made it 4x and 4x. Okay, and once it's factored, again, just take each one of those parentheses and set them equal to 0. And hopefully by now you're seeing that if we're setting these equal to 0, that all we're really going to do is just change the sign of these numbers. So for this one, we'll subtract 5. And then this one we would add 5. Okay, but again, still start off with x squared, so you still have to have two different answers when you're going through this. Okay, and then the last one we'll save the hardest one for the end. Actually, most people did pretty well with it, so that was a good step. Everybody made a good step because everybody seemed to have a pretty good handle on this one. Okay, so we've got 4x squared plus x minus 5. The first term is a perfect square, but when you get to the end, you've got a 5. That's not a perfect square, so we didn't have a shortcut for this one. So this was the one that and again, there was no greatest common factor. There was nothing we could factor out from this part. So at this point, all we were left with was to multiply the a times the c. So if we do 4 times negative 5, that's negative 20, and that's what we're looking for the factors of. Okay, the only thing you want to kind of look at is that because in the middle we got x, but remember that is a 1x there. So we're still looking for the factors of negative 20, where in this case the sum would equal negative 1. Alright, and again, there's not that many factors of 20. Seems like there would be, but there's not that many. It's either 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5. And the b term, oh, sorry, it was a positive one, my bad. That sum was a positive one. So again, the bigger number over here every single time has to be a positive. And if we do a negative divided by positive, that means the smaller number is going to have to be a negative. Okay, so the pair we need in this case is the minus 4 and the plus 5. Okay, now here's where, and again, we had just a small handful of people that had got the factoring to this point and kind of stopped. But here's where we had to go one more step, because in the beginning we multiplied by 4 to get this number. Here's where we've got to kind of even this thing back out. Now you've got to divide both of these numbers by 4. Because if we'd gone back and done the full method, we'd done 4 times 5, that would have been 20. We need this last number to be just 5. Okay, so with that part, we got a couple of things we can do. We've got 4 divided by 4. Well, that's just 1. Nothing you can do to simplify 5 over 4. So this is where we get to do the bottoms up. Take that 4 that's here, pull it up in front of the x, and make it 4x plus 5. Okay, if we do a quick check, we've got 1 times 5 for 5. We've got 4 times 1 for 4x squared. So that's really what you want to kind of check and see, is that if you multiply the last two numbers, do you get this? If you multiply the numbers with x, do you get that? And then we're good to go. Okay, so once the factoring is good, now again, just take each parentheses and set it equal to 0. And the first one, again, really just changing the signs. We're just going to add 1 to move it over. So we got x equals 1. Second parentheses, you've got the 1 extra step, because after you get rid of the 5, then you've got to go back and divide by 4. Okay, so after you take both sides and divide it by 4, of course the 4's cancel out here. And again, that fraction is, even though it's improper, that's fine. As long as it's in simplest form, that's all you have to have. Okay, so there's all the solving by factoring. I think we didn't look at one of the special cases, but just showing you all those that, again, if you can factor, the solving is really easy when you get to that point. The hardest thing you have to do on these is just remember to go back and do your factoring on those. So, anybody got any questions about anything on that part?